Gemara, this is Monday's Gemara, Daf Nun Dalet. Says the Gemara, Tana, never, this is the sugya about, we'll get to the sugya about if you could ask that something doesn't belong to you, that belongs to somebody else. Actually, the other opinion who argued this whole Gemara is in another Gemara, not even here, but let's see what the Gemara says. Tana learned, never, shaloi, osur, shchavedim, let's say Avodah Zarah, if it's your own, it's usher. But if it's someone else's, it's not usher. And we're talking about a behemoth. Now, by a behemoth, it's not usher for a hedge as we were before, right? But we're talking about l'gvoya. We're talking about that you're not allowed to use it for the base of Mikdash. Only if it's your own behemoth. If someone else's behemoth, you can't, no problem. Now, everyone agrees ain't not much love in Shalai. What the machlekes is going to be is if you did a maisa pu'ula on someone else's thing, does it become usher or not? So, you know what I mean? We'll ask you a question. Who never? What's the definition of never? If you worshipped it, baby shagig, baby amazing, even inadvertently, deliberately, bain ba'inus, forced, bain ba'ratzin. Ratzin and mazid is the same thing, but these are just the when you say shagig, the opposite of shagig is mazid, and say oinus, the opposite of oinus is ratzin. Now, just before we go to sugya, I think the way to understand this whole sugya is based on the Chakira B'Yisrael. So just understand. Basically, England has a fascinating chakira. When we say Oinus Rachmana Patre, if you did an Aveda by Oinus, we has more Kama, the Torah exemption. What's pshat? There's two ways to understand pshat. As he always does. I remember for bringing Lamed Vav, the first sikha, the Rebbe, very interesting, because the Rebbe liked both, Rogachover and everything. And the Rebbe gave a whole beer, the different approaches of Reis Engel and Rogachover in learning Sugya. Fascinating sikha. Anyway, so like this. When we say what's chat? Do we say an avera happened, but we don't attribute it to you? There's no individual who did it, but avera happened, so there might be a cheftavisa created here. Or do we say that no avera happened at all? No avera happened at all because we were honest. Okay. Very important. I think if you go with that gang, you'll understand the whole Gemara. Otherwise, it's very hard to understand the Gemara. Let's see. The Gemara says, we're trying to say, right now we're talking about, we said you cannot ask someone else's animal. So here it says that if you did it by oinus, it's still, you cannot bring it to the Gavoya. So what's the definition of oinus? How do we understand it? Lav, isn't it the pshat, going to honors behemoth that you went and forced another behemoth, you bow down to it. And therefore, you can't use it on the base midrash. Why do you come to that conclusion? Why say that somebody forced you to book the Avodah Zarah? Simple. That's Moshe Pshat. Just like Shagig. You did it, the Shagig, thinking you're allowed to. So Oinus means that you were forced into it. Exactly. Oinus is the only case that we're going to learn is talking about someone else's baby. Oinus, you forced another animal. Otherwise, all other cases about your own. So the Pshat is very simple. Because it's an oinus, and an oinus is what do you call it? Nothing really happened. There's what do you call it? By an oinus, we'll say that nothing really happened. So it can't be talking about your behemoth. If your behemoth was an oinus, what happened here? So the oinus maybe is another person's behemoth. Somehow or another, it becomes us. We'll see. You're going to sue every covenant. What happened was a guy forced you, and you did your own behemoth. Why? And the chiddush here is that it's tag usher. The behemoth becomes usher. Why did the behemoth become usher? Because Aveda happened. And Aveda happened, even though you were forced into it, and Aveda happened. Just that you won't be liable, but Aveda happened. So you can't use the ligvoya. Sorry? Oh, that's something else. We had more Avodah already. You think about something else. But says the Gemara, Maskal Abzeda asked, Eines Rachmane Patre, L'choyre Rachmane Patre. So what's he asking? The Chsivos don't know, but he's asking, then it should be usher. If it's your own behavior, it should be usher. It's better, if it's your own behavior, why should it become usher at all? So therefore, better to learn oinus, that what? That you did not, nobody forced you, you did it deliberately. Someone else's behemoth. And therefore became usher. But if you were nanus to do an aveda, nothing happened. So clear. That's the now you understand the machlekes of Muhammad and Abzeda. Abzeda says nothing happened, wouldn't be also Lugavaya, and Muhammad says no. That Aveda happened. Just you will be punished. No, that's Shabbos. That rule is only about Shabbos. The question is, what's Shabbos? I mean, clear. You see right here. Abzeda says no, and Muhammad doesn't agree with that. Of course he agrees. Nobody argues on the question is, how do we do the behemoth? Elam Rabba, says Rabba. Hakul Haya B'Chlal Loisa. The Torah said, don't worship, I don't care how, no rules. So therefore, even B'Shagig and you B'Inus. Ukisha part of the Chakar, then it says that you have to live with mitzvahs, L'Loishi, Yambas Behem. So therefore, if somebody forces you to do Avodah Zarah, is Yatsa Einus, you're Pater. So the way we learn now, even Avodah Zarah, you're Pater. Which is a big finish. Remember, we were in Sanhedrin, some page. This is the view of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel holds that not like we say that this is the view of some Tanai, but not like we say that the Kolatai Kula Einach Monopatra except the three Avedas Yavar Yavar, right? And one of them is Avodah Zarah. He's saying no. All Avedas Yapatra. But then it says don't be Chil Hashem, which we had in Maravid, that if you do Aveda b'Fehesya Chil Hashem, then you have to die. Then I feel about So in other words, the way the gang of Rava here is not like we always learn the three Avedas is Yaharig Yaver, but like the other Tana there that says that no, all Avedas in the Torah b'Chaybem, you don't have to die for. But if it's b'Fehesya, if it involves a Chil Hashem, then any Aveda you have to die for. Okay, so depends if it's hidden, depends if it's open. And the open is the Chil Hashem, then you have to be prepared to die for. And therefore, because he didn't, that's why the behemoth is also. So then the Rabbanah said to Rav, we bring up rice to support you. That would be my source, the stands, the Shemesh of Avodah Zarah. That supports Avodah Zarah during Exeda, but it's a Shmad. Even though the butler, is like butler. Why? Because the Shas Exeda is like a Befehesia openly. You should have been prepared to die, and you didn't. That's why it's Asif. Only if it's Befehesia or Exeda Shmad, which is like Befehesia, only then it's Asif. Otherwise, it doesn't become Asif. Almost, this is amazing. Rabbi had a Bryce to support him, and Rabbi, instead of saying, "Oh wow, I'm right," he said, I'm honest enough to tell you, I don't think the Bryce is supposed to be. Maybe amongst the Yidden there was a Yid who enjoyed Avodah Zarah. Maybe. And therefore, Taka is Avodah Zarah. Not because they were forced into it, but maybe because a Yid wanted it, and that's enough. And Rashi says, interesting. Rashi is pretty tough. Definitely there was some Yidden there who enjoyed it. Now, Taisa says if you learn from the gang of the Gemara here, it seems that Rabbi Paskins like Rabbi Shmuel. I'm just going to tell you the words of Taisa here. The second line of Taisa, Habetzin Haber Fehesi. It says Taisa, from this Gemara, it seems neither lives like Rabbi Shmuel. Now what? The Shari. If they threaten you to do Avodah Zarah, don't do Avodah Zarah. The Shari now Betzina. Yeah, if it's discreet. The Kasha, Svish Sholem, Shenifsik Avodah Yabba Vayar. You didn't taste the words. The fact that Rabbi Shmuel has that opinion doesn't bother Taisus. It bothers him that the Rava says, I agree with Rabbi Shmuel. How do you understand that? He says, Chas v'sholom on Rava. Doesn't have Chas v'sholom on Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel clearly says that you don't have to be Moise Nefesh for these three Avedas. And yet, if Rava says Rabbi Shmuel is right, Chas v'sholom. Wow. Why? Because how can it be the halach? But yet Rabbi Shmuel said that. Anyway, interesting. Let's go back to the Gemara here. I'll give you another answer. You know what's talking about here? Why the animal becomes asur? Even if you hold that oinus is you are why the animal is asur. We're talking about that you used the Avodah Zarah, you poured wine. You did a takrev Avodah Zarah in front of another Avodah Zarah, and you poured it al kaneh on the horns of this particular animal. But no, this is like a shimish for the Avodah Zarah. You did it in front of Avodah Zarah on the horns of the animal. He's masculine of Adam. Rabbi said. No, yes. Chizkiah come along and say, we're talking about you did another behemoth. But if you remember, there's an opinion that says that even though a person cannot ask something that's not yours, but if you did a maisa, it becomes usher. So we're talking about you did a ma'aser. What did a ma'aser? You poured the wine in between the horns of the animal. So the Gemara said, that's a ma'aser. I never do. It's just a platform. V'sharian is permitted. And we know that balachayim don't become usher at all. If else tashmish, only avodah zarah itself you shouldn't use for gavoya, but tashmish avodah zarah you can, if it's not avodah zarah anymore. You turn the animal into avodah zarah, and you worship the animal by pouring wine between kanel the obed b'maiser. Now that the animal itself is avodah zarah, you did a maiser. And that's why you can ma'anish another animal, because you did a meiser. Came along, even though you bow down to the behemoth and also by meiser, also if you did a meiser, it's also. Now there are three Amoraim that argue said the chulim, but the Gemara here doesn't bring it down. Nachman said, "Fuku, go out, but Omer le'ula, tell Ula, no big deal. Come out, tirgamur abhuna. You're telling me that if you did a meiser, if you bow down to the behemoth of a friend, that you should use it in the mizbeach. You already, Rav Huna already gazumped you. He already said it before. Rav Nachman said, "Kartigma Rav Huna shmai the bubble in bubble." Where you think a big chiddush, you can't make Israel chose new dinim. We already know about it in bubble. So Rav Huna said, "If the behemoth of your friend was lying in front of Avodah Zarah, you did it, even though it's your friend. You shechted one side. So it's not yet for full. You only did chatzi or whatever, the bashet. You only did the esophagus or the trachea. Usher, you did a mice. It's usher. And all the Rishonim try to wonder what's going on here, because this Rabbi Huna's case is talking about where it's usher even for an ordinary person. It's usher to hedyet. Rabbi Yechon is talking about you did a little bit of a mice and it's usher l'gvoya. Two different things altogether. So it's not really you gazumped you. That's a big mice, it's a small mice. Anyway, so they try to work out what's going on here. Minallah, and how do you know the usher? How do you know it's usher? If you did a mice, I know it's usher. Is it from the fact that koinim was served in a place where they shouldn't serve? That's why they were forced to do things, and they're not allowed to work in the base of Midrash anymore, and we penalize them. They cannot work in the base of Midrash anymore. So the same thing by an animal. We penalize if you did a mice, you cannot use the animal. That means it's going to the rabbanon. With him, shiny koinim, they could have a choice, as we had yesterday. From the stones of the bech, when the government came along and they used the stone of the bech, you're no longer allowed to use it. But Dilma, maybe Kidra Papa, maybe like a Papa says a bow Poritzim that they came in and the Goyim now owned it. It became Chulin, and once it became Chulin, it's no longer Avodah Zarah, it's no longer Hegdish. Remember, Kozman is Hegdish, ain't other Moshe Dabashen Shalai. But bow Poritzim they made a Chulin, and once they made a Chulin, it became the guys, and therefore it's Avodah Zarah Mamish. We learned from the Kalim from Achaz that he used the Kalim for other things, and even though he couldn't ask something that Shein Shaloi, but nevertheless they hid it. When he was bad, we had a machlekes between Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul and Rebbe had a limshat, and Rebbe limshat the pshat is they didn't use it anymore. They hid them. Yeah, even though the Kalim don't belong to Achaz, they belong to Hegdish, and yet because he did a ma'aser with them, he asked it. So if he learned out, then you can ask somebody else's things if you did a ma'aser. The we got substitutes. I was keeping the other ma'aser. It's a ma'aser. That's why Achaz asked it. Hachanami keeps us the ma'aser aser. He also Rabbi in another case. Rabbi came along named Rabbi Yechon. They always come from bubble to try to solve the bubble and pass on, dinim. So Rabbi came in Rabbi Yechon and he said, "Afa pisha amru hamashtachva lekarka olam." So we learned before, if you bow down to ground and elahayim alaharim, and not the mountains themselves. And we have two opinions of the Gemara, either because it's mechuber or because there's no human hand involved in it. But chafa babayda shichlemaidus. If you went ahead and you dug all kinds of caves in them, also it becomes also. When Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yehuda came along, even though if you bow down to a living animal, it doesn't become asr. But which means that if you, let's say, gave someone Avodah Zarah and he in return gave you an animal in lieu of the Avodah Zarah, that the Isser of the Avodah Zarah now is Chalipin passes on to this animal. When Rabbi came along, he said it back. We'll go a step further. What about Chalipin? What about now you took this animal that's also Avodah Zarah and you swapped it for something else? Does it continue passing on that everything becomes part of Avodah Zarah? Is a machlekes. So Rabbi said, "Pliga, but Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Yossi, Rabban Chadam, Chalipin asudin, Chalipin but Chalipin the next generation is mutter. The Chadam Rabbi Chalipin Amisur, and everything is awesome." By time, what's the reason? What's the reason why the second generation should be also? On Makra, again in today's Chitas, it says that everything that emanates of Avodah Zarah should be also kamayu. I don't care how many steps down. Anything that comes from it, hareyu kamayu. It's still tree like Avodah Zarah. Nuvidah, the one that says that it's mutter l'chayda, it says kamayu. On Makra, the very same pasuk it says ki chedim who v'loy chalip only it and the chalipim, but no further than that. The Idach and the other one, Ahu Baila, he what he do with who? What he do with who? The Mute, but about Erla, we don't say that the Chalipin is Asr. And Klaya Kedim. That even though they're Asr Bahana, if you swap it over, the Isa does not continue on. She'im Machran, if you sold it, the Kiddush b'demain, and you Mekadosh the money, Mekudesh, she's Mekudesh. There's an interesting Rashi here. Rashi says that she's Mekudesh, but the guy himself is Asabana. For him, it's Arla. Right? For him, it's Arla. It's Asabana. And yet he can Mekadosh a woman with it. And why? For him, it's direct benefit from Arla. And for her, it's not. And Rashi said that we only decided that din regarding Kiddusha Isha. Regarding everything else, we say that you can't, if you can't have Anah, how can you use the money to buy something you haven't Anah? But with Kiddusha Isha, matter. And Taisa explains why. Taisa says very nice. The second shot Taisa is because the mitzvah Puravu, such a big mitzvah, we want to make it as easy as possible for women to get married to have children. So therefore they are matter. But here, this the Mishnah Melech's famous question. When you say by Kiddushin, if you have to give a woman a Shavah Pruta, what happens to you? It's not worth anything, but to her it's worth a Shavah Pruta. Ishim Kuddush. An example he gives there is she's sick. So it's also Bahana. She is sick. So because she is sick, she's allowed to have Hana. For her it's good, but for you it's also Bahana. You're giving her nothing. Ishim Kuddush or not. Here you see exactly the same thing. That for him it's Asr because it's Orla and Klai Kedem, so it's also Bahana. But since she's a step removed, so for her it's mutter, and we say it's mekudesh. Klar. So l'chayda, this should, and I don't remember Shlomo bring this tomorrow. L'chayda, this should answer the Shlomo Chakir. Anyway, his whole thing, the Zion on days, all those Chakiras in the Gemara, based on that. Says Gemara about we're a place. Tell you what, right? The other one, how does he learn that it excludes Klai Kedem and Orla? So he says, you know why? Orla Klai Kedem, let's see, you don't need to meet. The Habla because you have two psukim that teach you that Chalipin is us, and we have a general rule: if the Torah repeats twice the same din, we just said by what it says, so we know that it passes on another generation. And Shvius, it says, Ki Yovel he, right? It's Yovel. Kodesh Chilachem. We're comparing it to Kodesh. What do you know about Kachim? Ma Kodesh tables the dam of us, just like Kodesh. The money that also becomes Hegdish. Av Shvius tefes the Mever says, you swap Shvius for money, the money also becomes like Shemitah. You have to finish it before Pesach and so on. If you're going to compare it to Hegdish, let's go a step further. What's it in by Hegdish? When you swap money for Hegdish, the Hegdish becomes Chulin. So maybe by Shemitah also, if you swap it for money, the Shemitah, the original Shemitah fruit should become Chulin, or no longer Shemitah. It says, it still remains, it says, and what it remains the way it is. Okay, but here's interesting by Shemitah, which is different than Avodah Zarah. By Avodah Zarah, every generation comes Avodah Zarah, the new one comes, and the old one remains. By Shemitah, it's only the first and the last. Okay, so look at it, but meet they both have the same din. You have to finish it whenever finishes the chai in the field. That's when you have to get rid of it. Lokach basa dog. I mean, now you swap the meat for fish. Yotza basa, the meat now is no longer shmita, but nichmasu dogim. The fish take its place. B'dogim yain, you swap now the fish for wine. Yotza dogim nichel yain. The wine takes its place. B'yain shemen, yotza yain nichel shemen. Okay, so the last and first. So that we learn that. So therefore, we don't need a posse to exclude Klai Kedem and Shemitah. The other one says, I hold like Rabbi Yehuda holds snakes to milam. Then you do learn from two psukim. Therefore, I need who to mayit Orlin Klai Kedem. Taisa asks a fascinating question and remains with the Tzorachim. When do we say Shnei Ksum Ben Gechet Ein Melamdim? They teach exactly the same din. Why to repeat it twice? But Avodah Zarah and Shemitah are very different. Avodah Zarah, every stage of the way, it's us. By Shemitah is the first and the last. The Torah couldn't have relied on one or the other. You needed both dinim. So where's the Shnei Ksum Ben Gechet? I taste the remains of the question. Mishnah. This is the Agada the Gemara throws in between Avodah Zarah and the laws of the Yain. Shaul says, "Kenim, but I mean, this Kenim asked in Rome. In Einer to the Tanoim, in Einer Tzoyne Bavodah Chavim. If the Eivisha doesn't like people worshiping idols, Loma Einer Bavatla. So why doesn't he cancel it? Why didn't he just whatever they're worshiping destroy it?" So they said to him, look, if they were worshiping that we don't really care if they exist or don't exist, they would have destroyed it. Look what they're worshiping. What because you have these idiots out there that we want David destroys the whole world. So they said to the Chachatanoim, Cain, you have a davish ain't tzarich loylaboy, but you need a davish tzarich loylaboy. So the things which are critical for the maintaining the world, let you live, and the other things you don't need, destroy it. Very interesting. There's a lateral thinking. That means that we are supporting them. You know why? They'll say, Teidu, you're right. Those that were destroyed because they're not ketchkas. But the sun and the moon, the fact that it's still existing is that I David exists. So and the Bryce a bit more detailed. Talking about the philosophers. Ask this Canaan, but I mean, email the case. Why is he canceled it? We don't need the same thing. How do you even battle? He would have canceled it. But you want to destroy the whole world because of a few idiots. The world continues. The shaitim should kill and these idiots who do Avodah Zarah will have to, will one day, get the retribution. The Barachar had it's another thing. Somebody stole a measure of wheat. The whole was Zarah Bekarta. And Hashem, and then he went and planted the ground. So the rightfully should be Dinu Shalai Titzmach. David should make it not grow. Why should he benefit from his stolen items? The David should decide the world should continue running normal. And these idiots one day will be punished. A woman and a man commit adultery. Dinu Shalai Titzabur. Rightfully, he shouldn't give birth. She should benefit from Naveda. They one day will be punished. The Abisha said, they make my cell as if it has my signature on it. It has no signature, and they make it open for everybody. But more than that, when they do their Avedis, not only they open slather, but they pull me in, they schlep me in, they put the signature, their signature on this ring, and what? I have to give birth, make this woman, if she's naturally pregnant, or grow from the ground, and all these things. He's a fire that consumes. Why is he only punished the worshippers and not the Avodah Zarah itself? Avodah Zarah is worse. I'll give you an example. He had one son. And this son decided to have a pet dog. But the son of Chutzpah, what did he name? The nickname of the dog was his father's name. Every time he would swear, he would swear in the life of his dog, but he would call the dog by his father's name. The king heard about it, he got really angry. So who does he vent his spleen on? Does he scream on the son or does he scream on the dog? In other words, you're Avodah Zarah like a dog. What do you want from Avodah Zarah? He had a choice. How can you call Avodah Zarah a dog? Avodah Zarah are real. Yeah. What exactly did you see in the Avodah Zarah? And I'm going to ask that you fell in love with it. Once there was a big fire in the whole city. In those days, they had wooden huts, everything burned through. The Nisra Kol Yikula, but that base of it, that house of Avodah didn't burn down. The Melabasadam, Shasarchol Medina, one nation rebelled. Does he fight with the living, or does he go to the cemetery and exhume all the bodies and kill them as well? Your Avodah Zarah is dead. I'm like, kill at the koyroisa, mess at the koyroisa. You're calling a dog dead. Even cage. So that will tell you the true debate they used to have. If so, we also had in Sanhedrin, I think it was a similar debate about the sun. Should we Why isn't he just destroy them all? I'm like, the same thing now. You're right, he would have destroyed it. Oh, but all these things and lafikim into these springs or the gaias into the hills. We should destroy the whole thing for these shaitan. It says in Pasuk, I'll save Kol Malpin Adam Num Hashem. You want? It's like a question mark. You want me to destroy everything from this world that says the Eibishter? You want me to destroy everything? Awesome, Adam, should I give Adam behemoth? Should I go ahead and destroy all the behemoths? Because these are all the things that they used to worship. Also, by the birds, the yam, and the fish, and all the things that these Rishonim are stumbling over. The nation because they use Avodah Zarah, I should destroy them from the world. But they also worship men. The should I destroy? Humankind should be destroyed. What's going to be left? So I have no breda, and let them choose. The beautiful Ram, if I remember correctly, I didn't have a chance to look at it. I'm just Mishnah here. Pretty much nice. If I have a chance to look at it, I'll tell you tomorrow what it says. Beautiful. Okay, have a good day. Tomorrow we'll learn Tuesday's Gemara and